So, welcome everybody. I'm Rob Bandyhide, Deputy City Manager in the City of Escondido, and I really appreciate you coming tonight and being part of this discussion. So this is our community advisory group. We meet on a quarterly basis. We try the best to kind of keep that schedule, and we want to bring different conversations around people experiencing homeless, what the city is doing in this space, what our role is, but also just giving you different perspectives. We think that anything of magnitude like this, we need to be informed. We need to be educated. We need to hear different points of view. We need to hear what the challenges are, and we need to react to that. It's a journey that we're all on, I believe. And I think that in order for us to make a difference, we need to continue down this journey to be educated and see how we can make a difference, right? And then continue to adjust. As we get more information, we can think through some different things and get different perspectives and continue to adjust and continue to improve. So I wanted just to kind of talk through a little bit about the room and what's kind of going on here. Restrooms, you go through either one of these exit doors to the left. There's restrooms there. There's also some snack machines in the back there if you still need it. If you do get a phone call, you need to take a call, whatever, if you can just exit out one of the two doors and take your call outside, that would be great. We have a little bit of an agenda, a flow to this meeting, so we'll kind of go over that a little bit. If you did get a chance, I really appreciate if you could sign in so we can get your contact information if you want to share that, so we can let you know about future events, pass along information. That would be great. Just to kind of recognize a little bit of who's in the room, we'll do some introductions, and then also let Holly introduce our panel. So, I want to introduce and recognize Mayor McNamara, back here in the corner. Appreciate you being here, supporting our efforts in this space. Really like to do that. Captain, you want to?
Captain Mark Peterson, I'm our Operations Bureau captain. Under that umbrella falls our COPS unit, and they deal a lot with some of the homeless issues here in town.
Valdivia?
Hi, Jeff Valdivia. I'm the sergeant in charge of the community-oriented policing and problem-solving unit.
In the back, in that corner over here, we have Joe Gillard, Public Works Director, also leads our Quality of Life team. Deputy Director of Public Works, Dave Nyberg, also very important in our response times and the efforts that we do throughout the city and on our homeless efforts. Holly Nelson, Housing Neighborhood Services Manager. Let's pass it over to you to kind of review a little bit about introducing the panel, a little bit about the process we're going to do tonight.
Perfect. So thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules. Gosh, it feels nice to meet in person. It feels really nice to have the energy in the room, and thank you also to our wonderful panelists. I'll be introducing them a little bit later, but I just wanted to share a little bit about what to expect for today. We did write some questions, and we met with these wonderful ladies, so we're going to start with them giving kind of a quick bio of their experience. And then they're going to tell their story and their journey through homelessness. And then we do have a set, some questions that we thought that maybe the audience would be curious about. But we also want to give you the opportunity to ask questions. So we have index cards, and we will be giving index cards out so people can write their questions down in advance, and we'll go around and collect them. And I'm sure that there's going to be lots of similar themes, but we have Jake here who's going to be our runner. So we have extra pens in the back, so if you would like an index card or a pen, please let us know and we'll be happy to provide one. The other thing too is just the importance of this meeting. It is something that where we come together and we get to have a direct connection with people who really lived this journey or are still living in this journey in some capacity. And so I just, today with your questions and just with today's meeting, I just wanted to say that homelessness is really difficult. And there's a lot of trauma that people endure when they're on the streets. And you'll hear some of that today, but I just want everyone to kind of be thoughtful and come from that perspective when they're asking questions tonight. Some questions we may not get to everyone's question, but we'll do our best. So I just asked today to kind of, if we can just be open to new ideas. We have a diverse group of people in the room here, and then also just asking questions with kindness and curiosity, and just being courteous. I know that maybe somebody will be saying something, and that will get us really excited. We just ask that if you do have a question, feel free to reach out to Jake, and then we'll be able to get to that. The other thing too is just the importance of listening to people who have lived experience. There's sayings that like, don't design something without me, and who best to understand what the journey is like than people who've walked in those shoes. And so it is something that here at the city we are moving towards, where we want to really make sure that we're engaging people who have that real firsthand knowledge in our program design, and really what that looks like. So we're excited to have the group here, and we also have a furry friend too to join us.
An unusual amount of energy.
Yeah. So perfect. So with that, I just wanted to, I don't know if anyone has any questions before we begin. Great. So I guess I'll first start by reading the panel's bio, and I'll start with Vanessa at the end. So Vanessa grew up in Carlsbad. She has 2 sons and a daughter. In her early 30s, Vanessa struggled with addiction and found herself homeless here in San Diego, and specifically here in Escondido. She struggled for 8 years on and off, and today she has over 7 years sober. So congratulations. With her unique life experience, Vanessa started a grassroots organization in 2019 to help families and individuals get off the streets, and really changed the hearts out there through her own story and experience of homelessness and transformation. Vanessa first started hosting resources, and then that transitioned into an emergency shelter program, and today she's operating transitional and permanent housing. So really impressive. In March 2020, her grassroots organization finally became a nonprofit. And through her good work, Vanessa has helped house over 250 people and helped them get off the streets and move forward with their lives. So thank you, Vanessa, for being here today. She also is a radical recovery coach and for trauma through trauma coach through New Thought. She's obtained her domestic violence advocacy through the Community Research Center and through her training. And she's also part of the HEAL Network, which is a network for people who have lived experience to be able to do public speaking and speak in different government settings. So we're happy that she's here, as also with the Lived Experience group, and she is the founder of the Oceanside Homeless Resource Center, Love on the Ground. So thank you. Next we have Cassandra. Cassandra brings more of a decade of experience in policy advocacy for civic and nonprofits. She has been dedicated to creating pathways for individuals and families experiencing homelessness for over 4 decades. As the founder of 9213 Connects, she provides a mentorship program which promotes a learning culture driven by diversity initiatives. She takes pride in helping mentees become better leaders and team players through guidance and opportunities. Cassandra has led and collaborated with teams to identify solutions to homelessness, develop creative housing plans, and led system change efforts, which has led to stabilization and housing for families with minor children. Cassandra has also provided technical assistance to HUD, the San Diego Housing Commission, Housing Strike Force, Violence Against Women Act, Reauthorization Act, and the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. Cassandra has an extensive history of public service, including 15 years as an election official, 211 certified specialist, COVID-19 caseworker with San Diego First Responders team, and a patient right advocate for mental health and a trauma-informed certification through the San Diego Social Services through Grossmoran. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And last, but not least, we have Jessica. Jessica has been living in North County for over 21 years as a resident, business owner, persons experiencing homelessness, and a passionate volunteer. Jessica is a disability rights advocate and the founder of REACH, the nonprofit that specializes in homeless outreach for seniors, and for persons with disabilities. She's also a member of the Disability Safe 911 Task Force that meets with law enforcement agencies to improve policies and make 911 calls safer for vulnerable populations. She is a member of HEAL, Lived Experience Advisors, and the San Diego County Committee for Persons with Disabilities. She uses her eclectic life experience to shed the light of kindness on disability and homelessness. And when she's not out changing the world, she likes to spend time gardening and hanging out with her service dog. So, thank you, everyone. And so with that, I'm going to have each lady go through and introduce and tell their story. So, yes, do you want to go first?
Hi, everyone. First, thank you for being here. It's a real honor to be able to share vulnerable experiences in a more intimate environment. And I just don't even know what to say about this guy. I was just bragging to Holly on the phone about how his behavior is just 100% on point. And he's here to show me that not everything is so. Hey, Lush, up. Come here. I'm just going to resolve this with one move. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, come here. Come here. Come here. What's the carpet? Hey. Yeah. He's 5 years old, and we've been together since he was 6.5. He's my second seizure service dog. We very rarely are separated, and my relationship with him actually drives a lot of the work that I do, because as much as service dog law has improved over the years, every situation is unique, and there still actually is a lot of discrimination. So usually he's a stellar example. Today he looks like a service dog in training, but we're good. So my name is Jessica Kramer. I'm 44. I first experienced homelessness in Carlsbad. I moved here after college at 22 years old. I moved here for love because my boyfriend had gotten a job out here as an engineer right after we graduated. And I had a very happy life. I became a holistic health practitioner and a state certified instructor of holistic health. We lived in a cute little house. I enjoyed athletics. And I decided to take a trip to Costa Rica and Panama because I have friends that had gone and it seemed like it would be really fun. While I was there, though, I got struck in with a jungle fever. That I had 105 fever, and it turned into an emergency, and I came home on an emergency flight, and unfortunately, I had a tropical disease that wasn't that easy to diagnose and treat, and it led me to a diagnosis of recurrent meningitis, which is a recurrent swelling of the brain and spinal cord. And I started having seizures, and I became dependent on others, just to meet my very basic needs. And the first part of my journey led me to require a Social Security disability income because I ran out of my savings on my medical costs pretty quickly. And that income at the time was the maximum $800 a month. And that took me a decade to get. But once I got it, I began to have a poverty-based existence, couldn't work, and eventually I lost my housing. And I struggled for 15 years with homelessness. I experienced a lot of abuse as a sick, vulnerable female. And I was housed this September with a permanent Section 8 housing voucher in Carlsbad, the place where I became homeless. Holly was a big part of my journey. It helped save my life. And so now I get to, in my recovery, give back. On an average day, everything for me was survival and safety. I would say my primary experience was terror. And yeah, just very hard to climb out of that. I do still suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, and some of the effects of the meningitis and seizures and some brain injury issues. Sometimes I had to relocate to other areas because I was always chasing resources. Hey, sweet buddy. Thank you. And so, yeah, basically if somebody offered me any resource, I wasn't able to accept shelter and resources like that because of Brutus at the time. This is Lucius. But, hey. Stay with me. Good boy. So yeah, a lot of chasing resources with very little successes, and because of my seizures and service dog needs, I just experienced denial of access almost everywhere I went. So I'll pass it over.
Go ahead, Cassandra.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Cotton. I am 52 years old and a native from San Diego. I come from a long history of family members that engaged in civic duty in San Diego. My grandmother, who lived in Chula Vista at the time, was a community organizer. She ran a community center for nearly 30 years. My uncle, her brother, my mom's brother, was the first black lieutenant that retired with the San Diego Police Department. My father, as well as a lot of uncles in my family, I'm proud to say, served in uniform. So very proud of that. I'm a mother of 5, and I have 2 that are in college and 3 minors. And my story of becoming homeless began in 2019. I am also a recipient of Section 8 housing. Proud to say that I was a recipient for 12 years up until 2019, and was put in a situation that involved police officers. It involved city officials, not in this county, but in another county, where a decision was made for the father of my children to move into my home. And through that experience, I went into fight, flight, or freeze mode, and I ended up leaving the county. Well, let me back up. I'm from San Diego. In 2011, we moved out of San Diego and moved to Orange County, is where and then in 2019, at the height of the pandemic, I lost my place, and I was subjected to someone that had abused me for years, and ended up going through a legal process that's still ongoing that has affected my family in ways that I haven't yet recovered from. And so after losing my place in 2019, I reached out to domestic violence centers and retold a story that I had never really told. And I went through a lot of counseling and didn't have a place at the time. When I moved from San Diego into Orange County, I didn't have a place. I established my housing, got into a place. When I moved out of Orange County to Santa Clara County, same situation. But this time, I was without my children in 2019. I still have not necessarily reunified with them. And through this process, I have had very bad experience with police officers, with understanding what my legal rights are as a parent, understanding my civil rights as a tenant, and I am still trying to have faith in this process and our county leadership to helped get me through this. I have always been someone who has taken pride as a resident and as a mother of 5 to stay with this process even when it gets hard, even when our leadership makes mistakes. And I really, really embrace and love San Diego. It's my hometown. I've recircled back to it, but I'm still in this fight of reunification for my children. And in this process, I ended up getting into a place, but losing my housing again. And I'm still going through the appeals process to try to regain that. When I was displaced in 2019, what did the day look like for me? I was placed in hotels and had a really hard time finding housing, even though it was given to me, and found myself being really embarrassed and ashamed to retell my story over and over again. And through that process, police officers were involved. And it got to a point where I began to be afraid of them in this process. I began to lose faith in the process of home stability, safety of my children, etc. And it was hard for me to focus on a job. I am a college graduate, and I've had some pretty reputable positions in the past, but my career path has always been secondary to my being a mom. And so I have relied on county services throughout my whole entire, my children's life. My oldest is 20. I have a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, 17, 14, and 12. Those are the ages of my children. And I've always advocated with the process of being someone that was a recipient of county programs to be in a safe area. Education was really important to me. And so I have not recovered from just the separation of my children, and I have not recovered from being in this transition, in this gray area of not having housing, but relying month to month on services that I feel like, for the most part, our county's done a really good job. I can say that San Diego has a lot of best practices, and I haven't given up faith in the police officers. I haven't given up faith in our local city officials. I am here today because I want to be able to collaborate with you guys, even in this process. My experience is not lived; I'm living it as we speak, but I have been. I feel like through this process that I can't have a nervous breakdown. I can't. I feel when I feel weak, I don't feel like I feel like I'm being judged more than anything else. But so I have I've relocated to do 2 different cities, but I've recircled back around. I am in the same apartment that I've been in for the last year, and I'm working on trying to get my housing back. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Graziano, and I wrote something, but I think I'm just going to read it and go from my heart, okay? So I'm 46, and I myself struggled with homelessness and addiction when I was 30. I struggled for 8 years, and today I have 7.5 years clean. I grew up in Carlsbad, and I went on to college, and I moved to LA, and I became a studio singer, and I was really successful. And then I ended up moving back, and I got married, and I had a family, and, you know, life happened, and my choices happened, and those choices absolutely impacted my ability, or inability, let's say, to really handle the trauma from my divorce and other things that had happened in my life leading to there. So not having the tools to get me through this, honestly, I really felt like I was suffering with depression and anxiety. You know, I had these 2 beautiful kids,
You know, I really had a loving environment growing up. No one in my family ever experienced drugs or anything like that, you know, and I really felt myself needing help. And so I went to my doctors through Medi-Cal, you know, and he sent me to a psychiatrist. And I really thought I was being sent to a psychologist, to be quite honest, because I really wanted to heal within. You know, I knew that I had to work through these self-limiting beliefs and the things that were coming up for me. But instead, I remember going to this psychiatrist, and within 20 minutes, I was prescribed Adderall and Xanax at the same time. And so me, never taking any pills ever, anything that was addictive, I had this 6-month, basically, relationship with Xanax and Adderall. And after 6 months, I really knew that it no longer served me. Like, it was not helping me. I was honestly just being numbed, and it really was taking away my ability to heal, right? My ability to experience and really be there and be present. And so I just stopped doing that. And I ended up moving in my cousin. I had a house in Oceanside with my kids at the time, 2 boys, and I moved my cousin in with me. And she was a nurse and doing really well, and she did meth. And I was like, well, you know, I was still struggling. I hadn't really, you know, I just stopped doing the Adderall and Xanax, but I know, like, I remember just feeling still angst and really feeling like I was nothing and worthless, and just that self-love, you know, just really not there for me anymore, you know, and my family thought I had problems, you know, and like wasn't really supporting me, and I really didn't know how to heal. And so I tried it, and I made that choice, and that really led to an 8-year off and on struggle with meth. And you know, how I became homeless is, again, I didn't have those tools, you know, to heal from my trauma. And, you know, it's been 7.5 years, and about 4 years ago, I came out here to Oceanside in North County, and I really wanted to change the story. I wanted to change people's hearts. I wanted to show them that, hey, anybody can fall where I fell. Anybody can, you know, get to that place. And I was very successful, again, you know, and I just, I felt called to start the Oceanside Homeless Resource. I was in Oceanside at the time, but I was doing outreach in North County. And so, you know, about 3 years ago, I started working or volunteering with Stand Up for Kids. And I would send them out to the streets with no shelter, with a backpack. And like, I'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you guys are safe out there. And it really started bothering me, you know, and it just was like, well, why aren't there places for these young kids to go? And why aren't there, you know, people that are educating them around recovery and trauma and really showing up for them, you know, on a more powerful level? And so, you know, I just felt called to start a group, a grassroots group called the Oceanside Homeless Resource. And you know, God presents things when he presents them, right? And all of a sudden, this family came to me and asked if I would help them, and they lived in their minivan. And that kind of got me to really reaching out to the community, and the community came in full force. They got them a motel room. They had Section 8 voucher. We got them home-cooked meals, and then another family came, and then another family came in, right? So this was just all me leading with my story, which at first was really difficult to continually tell people where I'd been, that I was a drug addict, that I used intravenously, that I lost my kids, you know, that these things happened to me. I lived in Escondido underneath the bridge by the Motel 6, you know, I mean, that was serious, you know, this was really happening, that my daughter and I lived in our car together here in the streets of Escondido, showing up to different markets, being really vulnerable, but also knowing I had to show up for her. I had to be the best I could through where I was. And at this point, things had happened to me through my addiction, but I remember staying sober for her for a while, really trying hard. We were staying at the Mount Vernon, and I was really trying hard but I had this codependency problem with her dad. And I also had needing to recover from myself, you know, like really take self-responsibility. And so, you know, so my mom called CPS, you know, and I was really fortunate to have a caseworker that really cared about me, that really said, hey, Vanessa, what are you doing here? Like, let's show up, you know, and a lot of times what I've seen is so many young moms or single moms lose their kids because the caseworker doesn't show up through the whole time. You know, they get a new caseworker and then a new caseworker and then a new caseworker, and all of a sudden that person has become a number or paid, you know, just like words on a paper, right? And they don't have their voice anymore. And so, you know, basically I just started coming out here and doing resource fairs and bridging people together. That was my big thing. Like, who's out here? How can we help each other? How can we bring solutions? You know, how can we really show up? And then COVID hit, and you know, this person donated $50,000 to me, privately. And I was going to buy property to build a tiny home community because I had gone up to LA and I've been really, trying to, how can I bring in community, love, purpose, really help people get off the streets and move forward, heal forward, right? And, but I decided to partner with a motel locally, and we opened up an emergency shelter because there were none there at the time. And, COVID really scared people. No one was opening up their doors. Nothing. And so here's me, single mom, Section 8, just like, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to tell my story and we're going to do this. And, I never thought I was going to open an emergency shelter. And so right away I started putting people together. I opened up 25 rooms, and I ended up moving to Carlsbad within 2 months. But within the first 2 days, I realized I cannot put people in here together. If I really want them to heal and move forward, I need to give them a safe place to lock their door, to be able to be part of a community, to show them love, to show them, what it means to have self-accountability, be radical with your self-responsibility, and me being out there, I didn't put up with a lot. I was very kind, but I was like, hey, I've been out here too. I was, out here just like you, and you have to show up. So we created this emergency shelter, and like Holly said, we've been able to get 260 about people off the streets. And, I'm just glad to be here on this side of it today. I'm glad to be able to show up. My kids, I got them back within a year. My mom luckily had my daughter, but I really try to focus on education around recovery and trauma. I think that people don't realize that when people are coming in off the streets, they're vulnerable. You need to be able to give them a safe place to heal. You need to be able to talk to them and they feel cared about. I needed someone to listen to me, to hear me, to be seen. I went from being a studio singer, having a very successful life, to be totally unseen, living in my car, in a parking lot with my daughter, feeling worthless, and that is not who I am. That has never been who I am. And so, today I really do try. I've been educating myself, investing in myself. I started the nonprofit, the Oceanside Homeless Resource. I came against a lot when I did this because I'm just this single mom out here just trying to make a difference, right? But I just kept going, and I kept realizing that every situation like this is an opportunity to grow, to expand, to work together. It allowed me to absolutely heal also, and then now create programs where people are very much succeeding. And so, I'm just glad to be here. I experienced homelessness for about a year out here in Escondido in 2014, and I went into Serenity House, and I did leave within a month. Because, again, codependency, trauma, right? I was like, I need to go out with my baby's dad. But then, honestly, when I went back 3 weeks later, it was on for me. And that was back in 2015. I really, really wanted to change my life. And what it looked like for me and my daughter out there, it was hard. I had to find bathrooms for her. I had to make it an adventure, a journey. Interfaith helped me a little bit, but there weren't really that many resources. And so it was really difficult for me. So, here I am today, and I just try to bring my heart and my lived experience, and, I try to be vulnerable and transparent so that, we can all grow together, heal forward. That's what I changed our nonprofit to called Love on the Ground Resources because, we're really out here trying to bring love back, and I really believe it. Self-love, self-worth, that changes people's hearts, and it allows them to remember who they are. And then also, what's really important to me real fast is, building communities, where people that have only $900, right, to $1,200 a month, where they have their own studio apartment or they have their own bedroom that's only $500, where you can really bring people together. And that's what we do with the permanent housing we had. We brought seniors, individuals, single moms, veterans all together to one location, and we built them up, and we brought in groups, and we brought in recovery, and we brought in trauma and coaching and volunteers and art and, whatever we could to just absolutely remind them that they absolutely are worth it. No matter where they've been through, you can change your life, but it takes community, and it takes us to understand this is a heart issue, and these are people, and I never thought I'd become homeless. I never thought I would do drugs. That was not in my, plan. So being able to come here today and also show my kids what's possible, that's huge for me too. I have a 21-year-old, a 19, and a 12-year-old. And, I do this for them too. I want to show them, no matter what comes your way, you have the power within to change it, and God gives us this amazing free will. So let's use it powerfully and lovingly. So thank you very much.
We can clap it. So thank you so much for each of you sharing parts of your story and just sharing how difficult the journey is, and that, you know, just because we're housed doesn't mean our journey is done. It's still a struggle, but I'm just so impressed with all the opportunities that you have done, and thank you for coming here today. With that, I did want to ask some questions, diving a little bit deeper into kind of your stories. And so I know some of you referenced staying in motels. Jessica, you mentioned some of the barriers with your service animal at the time. Out of the three of you at the table, did any of you ever enter into a emergency shelter or a domestic violence shelter during your journey? And if so, feel free to chime in and share your experiences. You want to just go this way?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah. So one of the greatest challenges of my journey was that I had these disability limitations. And one of the things people don't realize about the shelter and the bridge and the crisis housing, these temporary housing situations that we see in the homeless services, they have very strict intake requirements about being able to meet all of your ADLs, which is activities of daily living. So if you're an individual that's on the street, and you struggle with any part of your disability where you need another person to assist you to be able to fully participate in the program requirements, it is an automatic no at entry. And once that happens, then you are now, for me, a dependent adult is someone between the ages of 18 and 64 that, because of their physical or mental disabilities or limitations, is what the definition says, causes them to not be able to carry out normal everyday activities or to be able to protect their own rights. That's a very vulnerable position that comes with a lot of legal protections. So what I thought was, oh, here I am, this vulnerable person with these disability rights. You know, my therapist told me so. My doctor says I'm going to get housing and all these other assistances. But in reality, as I tried to access help, those disabilities were used against me. And in the 15 years that I suffered from homelessness, which included times that my doctors turned in mandatory reports to Adult Protective Services that were never responded to, because it turns out as policy, if you're under 60, Adult Protective Services isn't mandated to respond. You know, they don't put that in the pamphlet. You know, I had serious abuse issues, and even with that, there was never one time in 15 years that I was intaked and accepted into a program, except for what's now the Section 8 housing program, which allows me to use 1/3 of my disability income towards my housing, and then the federal government pays the rest of the bill. And for me, it just makes so much sense when I look out there that if somebody's put on a fixed income because of a medical or mental health condition, and that income is going to be $10,000-ish a year, there's no way to secure safe housing for that. It would only make sense that once you do get that Social Security disability income, that it would very quickly, you know, or ideally even beforehand, come with a HUD housing voucher. I do believe that's one of the great solutions that could solve homelessness, is if we made sure that seniors on fixed incomes and persons with disabilities on fixed disability incomes, that they are assured a housing voucher right away. And then there's still challenges with finding housing because of lack of affordable housing and discrimination barriers. But all in all, my life would have gone very differently, and I would have suffered far less medical and mental health injury had my disability income come with a housing voucher. And I really use my voice a lot to share how our system does not use the Americans with Disabilities Act, which allows for individuals with disabilities to get what's called reasonable modifications to fully access programs and services. What we found practically is that if you assert that language, it's usually automatic grounds for denial, and that we have some legal help with legal aid and fair housing and disability rights, but they're very limited. And I hope one day to see a very large organization of lawyers that are ready to fall behind if social service and homeless providers are not able to facilitate those reasonable modifications and provide literally the very most vulnerable people with shelter and safety.
Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else want to chime in too?
Yeah, I, as someone that fled from a person that I felt was abusive to me, in that process, I leaned on two different domestic violence agencies that housed me in the transition from moving from one county to another. The difficulty in transitioning into permanent housing for me was extremely scary. The first domestic violence agency said, well, we can only put you in a hotel for 4 days. And then after that, there's no room at our agency. And at the time, I did not have my children, but for me, I was just like, I'm unhoused. And I really, during that time, I really needed not only a facility to temporarily house me, but I needed that emotional support. And so I went from that domestic violence agency to another. They in turn housed me for another 10 days. And then after that, I went to a local church. And then through a local church, they were able to say, we have a friend of a friend that can rent you a room. And even with that, moving in with strangers, being housed with someone that you don't know is a very difficult situation as well. You have to understand the dynamics, you have to understand the background. And then I was, again, without my children. And so for me, it was always a task to say, I'm in a safe environment. I can, even without a house, my children can come to me and go to school and be safe. And I ran into a huge, it was a task for me. Being able to have an advocate that advocated in getting me a permanent housing with the voucher that I had would have been helpful, but that didn't happen. So, yeah, to answer your question, I was housed in a hotel for about 15 days.
Yeah, I ended up going to rehab here at Serenity House in Escondido. And when I got out, luckily for me, I had a family. You know, I couldn't stay with my mom because she had my daughter at the time, but I had a friend that ended up opening her house. I had a really hard time finding somewhere, so I was really lucky to have her couch. But I also was awarded a Section 8 voucher through CPS, and so that allowed me to try to find somewhere. But I'm telling you, it was really, really difficult for me to find anywhere. And the one place I did find was literally back where I used to use in Oceanside, right in the middle of this one community, right next door to someone that absolutely sold drugs, you know, and we even experienced it like a week later when the SWAT team came to his apartment. So, you know, it was really, I mean, again, with the Section 8 vouchers, it's wonderful that these are here, and, you know, me being able to create solutions too and help people move forward. I've noticed a lot of our people have Section 8 vouchers, but we can't find them anywhere to go, right? I mean, it's so hard. And luckily for me, I became a property manager, and I was able to open up Section 8 housing and also 2 apartments in my complex because I needed one, right? And I talked to the owner about it, and then we opened up another one for a lady. So, but it's really difficult. It's, you know, and that's the thing. It's like, it's almost like a hopeless situation. It's like, here's a Section 8 voucher. Okay, now you're on your own. Go find somebody that's going to take you with your limited income and your really bad credit and your history, and you go. And you got 3 months to go do that, so you know. And that's really what it is. There's nobody that's guiding you or showing you the ropes. And so one of the things I've tried to do is walk alongside our clients the whole way through, you know, and absolutely even tell their landlords, I'm here. You can absolutely count on me to show up. And, you know, and I've been able to do that because we're a small nonprofit. And I am a mom that's bringing my heart, you know, and showing up, right? So I'm able to show up every day and, you know, see our clients and really help them. But it doesn't always end up successful either, though. And it's really can be traumatizing for them.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing your journeys with Shelter and why you chose to go, and also to the limited resources, like with domestic violence, getting a hotel voucher for a couple of days, and with that expectation of then what, and that was really, that must have been very difficult. As well as with Section 8, the idea that, oh, finally I got housing, you have all this hope, but then just the barriers of, like you mentioned, and the triple the deposit and compete against everybody else on the rental market when housing is already at the lowest occupancy rate it's been in decades. So thank you for sharing that. So what did help? I know some of you, all of you are Section 8 recipients, but what programs did you find helpful? How did you access them? Sounds like some of you had to be your own advocate and your own champion for this journey, but I think it would be great to hear from your thoughts. So maybe Vanessa, I don't know if you want to go first.
Yes.
And we'll go down the opposite.
What did help, right? What did help? I had a very strong support system from my family and friends. So even though I struggled with homelessness, having them there for me, putting up their boundaries, their healthy ones, having expectations and making me accountable, it really did help me. And then program-wise, I used Interfaith a little bit. I went to local churches too, when I first started out, I had to help myself too. I had to really show up for myself and take accountability and start working right away. And my oldest son didn't talk to me for a year. So he told everybody I had died in a car accident. So I had to, and I really feel like, I know like programs, but for me, it's like really just showing up for myself and being consistent every day and waking up and then, like I said, working, and then the AA. I started doing AA and going to that, 3 times a week. That really helped me. Today I study something called the Radical Recovery of Self, which has 7 steps, which I've really been implementing in my own life the last 2 years. But, and just community, like just meeting people. I started, doing Stand Up for Kids. Putting myself back into service was huge for me. Like I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I needed to bring my heart and change the story and do something. So like I started making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and taking them out. And then I started meeting people and I walked the riverbed and, we did a cleanup there. Just really engaging every day and getting a little uncomfortable with the uncomfortable so that I could get comfortable again. That makes sense. But it's like I had to show up for myself, love myself, I started like reading Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. I'm sorry, but I did, like, how can I it's with it, but it was service. It was service and being able to give back. When I really started working for Stand Up for Kids, that's when the light went on, like, whoa. Like, we need to, what's going on? Like, where are you going? Where are you going right now? I'm going under the bridge. And that's kind of what got me going, like, to really help me be here right now today,
Yeah, for me it was ditto what you said. Self-care. It started with me holding myself accountable, and just recircling back around in my community. Service was big for me. It's something that I've always done, even as a kid. Civic duty is something that I pride myself on. Being a good tenant, a resident of a community that I embrace, is important to me. Being a good mom. And so with that came a lot of self-care, and to stop the blame game, stop blaming everyone, really trust our city officials and those at the county level with the services that they offer, giving them grace, being understanding and partnering with them, and calling them out when it's wrong, but also giving enough grace to say we're in it in the long haul. And so I'm still separated from my kids, and so through that process, having to deal with separation anxiety, I had certain forms of therapy. I've also worked very closely with San Diego Social Services and done a lot of training, a lot of trauma-informed training to better understand myself, but also to be able, when it comes to giving back, to be able to implement what I've learned. And what else? I'm still in the process. It's not a lived experience for me. I'm still living it. And so just being able to sit here and share my story and to be vulnerable enough and bold enough to be able to just be very honest and open. I'm generally a very private, prideful person. I feel there's times where I feel angry, and I always have to remind myself to be humble and thank those that are in leadership for giving us this forum to be able to be able to share with other people.
I am going to immediately piggyback on service. My entire recovery happened serving others. There's something that happens with post-traumatic stress disorder where, and this has been seen on MRIs and explained to me by various neurologists and whatnot, where post-traumatic stress disorder does a very strong activation of what they call your reptilian brain, your fight or flighter, and it actually shuts down. People with PTSD have sometimes up to 15% shrinkage of their frontal cortex, which is the complex thinker. And so still to this day, people say, oh, but you're an advocate, you help so-and-so, you did this and you did that. And yet when it comes to a simple housing form for myself, I literally can't fill it out. I have to go to my advocates and say, oh, can somebody help me? I need an ADA reasonable modification. I can't do this. But when I'm helping others, although sometimes it can be triggering, and sometimes there can be an element of caregiver trauma that happens, but for the most part, it's my frontal brain and my heart, and I'm able to just drive and commit, and all that grit that I learned surviving my injuries is like the best gift I can bring to my clients. And I'm able to reach people that are not often reachable by others or by standard practices, because I really understand what it's like to live inside of a body that is, and a brain that is just not functioning correctly, and it just comes off in all these strange ways, and it's just really hard for the outside world to see what's happening on the inside. Sometimes this brings us into conversations of invisible disability and things like that. I mean, we learn in kindergarten, don't judge a book by its cover, but in part it's human nature. And, you know, we experience our world through a series of processes and judgments. And so I understand, I mean, I do it myself. Even sometimes, as many times as somebody's yelled at me for parking in the handicap spot without my wheelchair, or my legs look perfectly fine. There has been a time or two where I've seen someone else getting out of their car in the handicap spot, and I'm like, are you handicapped? You know, so I just try to give a lot of room for our humanness. And yeah, service has been the biggest. A little more personally for me, I was very fortunate early on to get access to a Medi-Cal funded therapist, a trauma therapist. And this is something that clients today don't have access to at all. The Medi-Cal waitlist for therapists is inaccessible. In fact, it's not even a waitlist. They won't even add you to a waitlist anymore. And so we talk about service resistance and different things, but when you really look at it, if a person doesn't even have basic access to a therapist, I mean, I think we really need to kind of take a couple step backs. My top 3 lifesavers were the now 13-year relationship I've had with a trauma therapist, who has been my absolute rock, shown me unconditional love in a way that I have never experienced before, and stood by me to help me understand that it's not my behavior, it's not my choices, that I suffer with a set of disabilities that make my life very challenging. And also a hard part for me was, because I've been abused so many times, sometimes people reflected and still reflect back to me like, well, what are you doing? What's your part in being a victim of abuse so many times? But honestly, my part is that I'm disabled. And in the times of homelessness, I didn't have extra money. I couldn't meet my basic needs. And it's like the analogy that I would give is if you were in the desert and you needed water to survive, and a predator said, hey, here's some water, you're gonna drink the water. I mean, it's just basic survival. So the therapist was huge. The service dogs helped me tremendously with managing head injuries, because both of my service dogs were trained to pin my head and neck down during a seizure emergency so I don't hit my head anymore. And then also there's just an emotional, and this isn't, I'm not calling him an emotional support animal. I'm just saying though, there's an emotional connection that happens just from smell and pressure of his body and different things that does help immediately soothe my neurological trauma and seizure mechanisms. And Holly was actually the first person that I was brave enough to really reach out to. She was the homeless response manager in Carlsbad at the time, because I didn't fit the typical image of what a homeless person looked like. I was actually missed constantly when there was homeless outreach and different things available, and I would just find myself in the bushes just looking out, wondering if it was safe to make myself visible. And, wondering, one, wanting to be seen, but also terrified of being seen. And Holly reminded me that the first outreach I ever sent was around the point in time count, when there's a brief moment where people go around and do a snapshot of counting homeless people. And I had been missed. So I saw all my peers get socks and a Starbucks gift card, but I wasn't included in that. And so I sent an email out that said, I don't count, as the subject line. And Holly actually met me in a park. All I could do was sob. And she was the first person that really held my hand, because I was too disabled to do what was asked of me to make it to the next steps. And I finally got included in the path to housing. So yeah, having a hand-holding advocate that will do anything to get you through all of the barriers was definitely one of the things that truly helped.
Thank you for your kind words. Yeah, just how difficult the journey is and how it's not a straightforward path. And I love that all of you said, like, what helped was like loving yourself through the process, like taking ownership, and then also giving back in service. And I think sometimes when you're experiencing homelessness, you feel so dehumanized. You feel like no one sees you. You're just this person. And then to be able to have that self-worth again and give yourself that dignity is so beautiful. And so I know each one of you just mentioned that. And also having somebody through the process. I think you've talked about the caseworkers changing, different people, and how each time you have to start over and tell your story, and to have somebody consistently guide you through that process, how important that is, as well as having family and friends through the journey. So thank you for that. So next, kind of moving on to system change questions, looking at that, and then I'm going to get to the audience questions. So if you guys want to write down your questions, Jake is here to be the runner and come around. But what can the average person do? We've got a lot of people in here. We've got a lot of people who are interested in the issue at least. And what can the average person do to help somebody or to even address homelessness?
First off, care enough to really take time to look and see what's going on. When I first came out to Oceanside, there was a really big disconnect. And this was about 6 years ago. And I just felt like nobody was understanding, like there was this misconception that everybody out there was because of addiction, right? Or mental health, when really it's the lack of housing that creates this, okay? And so as people and community members, I understand the not in my backyard, okay? But I don't. The thing about it is we are all in each other's backyards. We're all in this together, and we have to come together and understand what's the underlying cause, okay? Because without housing, no one has the ability to even start the healing process. And if we have our neighbors and community members. I run properties, I'm a property manager. I understand how important it is as a business, to run these and make sure that everything flows. But if we don't create what's necessary and we don't build housing to really help people get off the streets, and we don't use our voices, and we're always like, no, I don't want it around the corner. Don't want what? Someone's ability to heal, transform, create programs that absolutely, definitely benefit you and the person that's in that program. And, you have to find people like us, honestly, that have been there, and me, like taking my biggest struggles of losing my daughter and losing my house and losing my identity and my self-love, everything, my kids, and turning it into triumphs, understanding like, wait a minute, we can do this together. And I think it's, and what you're saying about, one of the things with our emergency shelter, I did not discriminate. I let anybody in. You have a dog? Okay, come on in. You have 3 cats? Let's do this. You know what? Oh, you're disabled? That's okay. Well, are you sure it's okay, Vanessa? I have seizures. What do you mean? It's okay that you have seizures. Okay, we all have something that we have to deal with, right? So it's just knowing that there's people out here like me and like us and like you, it's a hard issue. We're in this together. Of course we don't want programs that are around the corner from us that are allowing anybody to do whatever they want, but we do want housing first programs also that bring in accountability and self-responsibility. That's the biggest thing. I'm for housing first, but I'm also for people showing up for themselves, being accountable, recognizing where they've been, taking the blame off other people, and absolutely knowing it comes from within. That's when people start healing. And if someone's addicted or they have we send them to a different program. We make sure that we're, working with the hot team or whoever it is that's out there. When I first came out, it was difficult because, again, I was looked at as this person that was building these programs. Like, what does she think, But the thing is, you just stay consistent. You bring your heart. You do it honorably. I don't do it for money. I do it all volunteer. We raised over $600,000 to keep families and individuals private funding to make sure that people are moving forward, And so it's just like me coming and bringing my heart, you guys too, and stop with the not behind, if you're, again, it has to be in your neighborhood because we are in your neighborhood. I ended up in Escondido, but again, we have to build it together to where it's successful for everyone involved. And so that's where I have to say.
Cassandra, Jessica, would you like to weigh in on that? What the average person can do?
I personally stay engaged with my local city officials. I also think that, like she said, just to step up. There's a lot of discussion around tiny homes. There's also this gray area of government land and what it's going to take to have these tiny homes on there. I was a part of the COVID-19 team in 2020, where in Mission Valley, they had the hotels that they opened up for COVID recipients. That was funded by FEMA, the county, and a third party that was granted money. So maybe revisiting that, hotels that can be transformed into permanent housing, and having those that are part of that, participants in that program, really step up and show accountability. If you're paying your way, a normal resident, a normal tenant, there's rules to follow. To be a law-abiding citizen, to be one that is grateful for their neighborhood and wants to contribute toward that, it's important. Being community is extremely important. And, everybody has their own set of issues, but I think that just really understanding the tiny home initiative, the transformation of hotels, and how we can explore building those homes or hotels, transforming those hotels, what it would take at the county level to get stuff like that approved.
Thank you.
I feel like a lot of people don't know what to do, but want to do something. One of the things I think we can all say we're familiar with is when we're out there helping somebody and somebody sees us helping, whether we're carrying food or, handing someone a bottle of water, once people see us out in action, people do pull over and stop and say, oh, what can I do too? So, it's not that you want to jump out there and put yourself in an unsafe situation, but if there is an opportunity and you see somebody that's vulnerable and down or hurting, just don't be afraid to just look them in the face and see them, and if it's safe and the opportunity presents and you can do an act of kindness, I think that that's pretty significant. And I also think that we can really help each other to start shedding the narrative that homelessness is a certain type of problem with a certain type of person. For those who come here and get to hear these real life examples, hopefully you can go out there and share with others what you learned and just be part of that solution of dispelling some of those myths and bringing a little more humanity to the conversation.
So now I want to open up. Jake is here, so if you pick up index cards to read questions.
Raise up your cards and I'll grab them real quick and we can ask some questions to the panel. I know we've got some. Awesome. All right. Thank you. I'm asked to do this because I judge handwriting. And if your handwriting is poor, your questions I can get read or you get my interpretation of it. In there, thank you. Okay.
And this is not the only time you can still write questions, but sometimes when you hear a question, that kind of spawns another idea.
Okay, I got good news and I got bad news. We've got 20 minutes and I got about 20 questions. So this is the rapid fire portion of our
We're going to try to do quick answers.
Okay, so I'm not the bad guy if I keep this thing moving.
That's okay.
All right. And speaking of that, Vanessa, you get the first question.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to hold you to this. How did you get the funding for your nonprofit that houses people? And part two, does the county help you with resources for your organization?
So the way I got the founding for the nonprofit is I started the Oceanside Homeless on Facebook, and I just came out every single day and shared my story, and I just connected with different people through social media, and that just kind of created that traction. And then I did the Instagram, and so really it was just me coming out here being vulnerable every day, and for a good 2 years raising like $1,000 a day sometimes. Sometimes we get a $20,000 donation or $50,000. So it was just me. Private funding and sharing my story and being vulnerable and owning it.
Very good.
Yeah, and then through county, no. I have not received any county funding as of yet. I received a couple grants from some local private, and then also, again, it's really the community that has stepped up by $5, $10 donations that has raised this $600,000 this last year. So.
Thank you for that. Very good question and excellent handwriting. We're off to a good start.
Yeah, awesome.
This one is for the entire panel, a two-part question. And maybe Cassandra, I'll start with you. What services do you ask for that you wish you had more of, and did you feel comfortable asking your family for help?
No, I went through a stage of feeling embarrassed and ashamed and wanting to handle this on my own and being very prideful as a mother of 5. And then, what was the second question?
Second question was, did you feel comfortable asking your family for help?
I didn't. I didn't. What would have helped, what will help me through this process is having legal advocacy, understanding what my civil rights are as a parent and as a citizen of a county that I pride myself on. So legal advocacy will help.
That's real important. I'm glad you hit on that because it's such a tangled web out there. I know Holly's working on having a mobile court come in. And just for that specific purpose, because I feel you, I know how difficult that is and how it just buries you.
It created a hardship and $15,000 later.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Good question, good answer. This one is for the entire panel. I'm going to pick on you, Jessica, now you're left there. Did you have issues with law enforcement? I know we heard Cassandra talk about that. Was this supposed to highlight their homeless experience with law enforcement, the authorities? And what about a medical-funded trauma therapist? So law enforcement issues, like we heard Cassandra, and your experiences with law enforcement, and maybe a little more information on your trauma therapist that you spoke so highly of.
Yeah. So the number one thing that I really needed to prevent me from suffering extreme abuse and assault, including repeat sexual assault, was more help from law enforcement, especially with regards to law enforcement understanding how to qualify me as a dependent adult who qualifies for those special protections, because I never quite visually met that, what they understood the criteria to be. And even still to this day, for me to stay safe in my home, I do still sometimes wish more of law enforcement than law enforcement has the training and the awareness of. And so one of the things that we're working closely with law enforcement on is improving the awareness of the dependent adult penal code, the elder and dependent adult penal code, so that law enforcement has a better understanding of how to qualify a person with an invisible disability as a person with protections under those penal codes, so that they can offer those special protections when maybe some of the other penal codes don't fit, like a disturbing the peace or a criminal threat. When you look at two people who are equal health and you try to apply some of those penal codes, sometimes the qualifications aren't there. But if you look at the vulnerability of the victim, then it gives a lot more room for those assistances. And as trauma therapist,
yes, medically funded trauma therapist.
Yeah, so my first attempts at accessing trauma therapy was that it was not funded, and I actually had to pay $20 a session to see a woman that had come back to work after 20 years of retirement. She was in her 80s, and she came back to do pro bono work, and I paid her $20 a week to see her, and she was with me for 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. This is a good segue. We talked a little bit about law enforcement. I know we've got Sergeant Valdivia, Captain Peterson. There's a lot of questions submitted online, a lot of demand for you guys' brains and your take on this. Some of which came from our business community. This is really interesting. I'd like maybe to hear, Sergeant, your side, and then the panel as well. I think we get a good bookend of this. Question is, how do we, the business owners, protect our property, business staff, patrons, and insurance tax rate hikes when property damage occurs from the effects of homelessness on our community? How can a business deal with the aggressive behavior that's becoming more of a norm than the exception? The disregard of health standards and hygiene, such as using public areas for bathrooms to keep the community safe, using public sidewalks, back alleys, bushes as restrooms and shower facilities. Sergeant, I know you deal a lot with environmental change and our business community. You have a lot of projects going on. Any advice to the business community that you typically give out along those lines?
Yeah, I would say the most common piece of advice we have to give business owners is they need to take ownership of their property. I spoke with 3 business owners today who called my number directly to talk about a problem, and I'm like, well, have you gone outside? Have you taken care of your own property? Are you talking to your neighbors? Are you doing? And they're not doing anything. They just want to call one number and make something go away. And I understand. I mean, nobody wants to get into a confrontation, but at the same time, it's your business. You're the one who's personally invested in it. And a lot of times, if you go outside and you take care of your own property, or if you tell people, hey, this is private property, it's time to move on, a lot of times that will do it. But the law applies to everybody. And, I understand there's this, I believe the question said something about that it's just becoming all too common.
Yeah, aggressive behavior, like you're saying, moving on, fear of, asking a business owner to confront somebody that's homeless and could be violent, and how, tips on doing that.
Yeah, I would tell people, number one, you try to do what you can to make your business less inviting to any kind of illegal behavior. And sometimes we do that by going up to people's businesses, and we'll do what we call a CEPTED assessment, crime prevention through environmental design. And we'll look at certain places on the property. It's like, well, this is why people are hanging out here, because this particular area is attractive for this particular reason. and we give them advice on how to change the environment. But then a lot of the rest of it has to do with what you are willing to allow. Unfortunately, it's human nature. You get what you tolerate. And if you allow certain activity on your property, you're just going to get more of it. So sometimes it's as simple as calling the non-emergency line for the police department and saying, we have people that are drinking, that are using drugs, they're setting up a camp on our property, and so we can just tell them to move along. Sometimes it's with, if you do have established camps, calling, using the reported app so that we can kind of remove some of that stuff. But it's more about just being proactive and doing something about it instead of just lamenting it.
I want to come back to that. Ladies, you know, in your lived experience, you've seen a range of homeless, from aggressive and violent to chronic to service resistant to the people that are actually in the right place to get your services. Any advice to why are some areas more friendly to homeless? Why are some less?
Well, for me, I think that if your city doesn't have what's needed and the resources, and even a community center where people can go during the day and get those resources, they're going to be hanging around by your local establishments. One of the things I've done over the last couple of years is I'll go into businesses with my card and I'll tell them, hey, if you have somebody that's here and you need some help, you can give me a call and I'll come down and see how they're doing and see if I can help them in any way. And so, to have like maybe advocates on your force or people like that absolutely like me, that will just go and say, hey, because I'll show up. I mean, I get calls all the time. I'll show up. And so, but again, if the resources aren't there, it's a revolving door. I mean, okay, so you're going to move them, but where are you moving them to? Do you have a place? Are you just going to have them move down the road, or how about across the street? Are you taking them to housing in those shelters? Unfortunately, a lot of them, we feel unsafe going there because congregate shelters, you go and you really do feel, I experienced that myself, and it was a very unsafe environment for me. And then, so people aren't resistant. It's that they don't feel like they're going to go somewhere that's going to protect them and keep them safe. And so they're going to stay close to businesses and places like that until you create those resources. I mean, there's nothing you can come and clear them out, but they'll be there the next day.
There's funding with the McKinney-Vento Act. I'll speak on behalf of moms. I know that the districts annually are given funding for the McKinney-Vento Act. I was a mentoree to two individuals that identified as LGBT. They were two females, had a 7-year-old son. They were in my community, but it was a very gray area as to when the districts are given that funding, what do they do with it? Are they allowed to, is it allocated so that they move the person with the child within the district? In this case, they moved them out of the district. And I don't think that the district funding was ever applied to the two individuals, to be honest with you. So there's a gray area around McKinney-Vento funding. And I'm like her, people have to, if you weren't in your situation, there would still be rules to follow. You have to be a law-abiding citizen. You have to respect yourself. You have to take care of yourself, hygienes. And so we all fall on hard times, but there's a certain level of accountability that everybody should have, whether they're housed or unhoused.
Well said, and I think that's a good designation you just brought up, Sandra. I totally agree. I know, Sergeant, you deal on the streets. There's a criminal element. There's a homeless element. There's people that need services, people that don't want services, people that want to live this lifestyle. I know, Sergeant, you deal with more of that criminal element. I think all too often we lump that in one umbrella of homelessness. Yeah. But there is people preying on homelessness, people that don't have a place to live, and it's sad because it's not, homeless isn't all successful folks like you. There's also a criminal element that I know our businesses are dealing with, and which brings me to the next question here, which is, this question says, why is the accountability putting on the citizens and the business owners to pay for repairs to their business and no accountability from the actual people doing the damage? So this is the effects upon the business, Sergeant, of trash being left behind, irrigation being torn up, dumpsters overflowing, collecting trash, that type of thing. The citizens and business owners are making every effort to make a living, pay their taxes. Sales tax for the city, obviously, is why we have the funding that we have to provide the services. Giving homelessness handouts aren't correcting the problem. Where is the accountability to the individuals who are causing property damage in unsanitary conditions. Could you talk again about that, Sergeant, about the issues in...
Yeah. Well, I mean, if from a criminal justice perspective, if you're talking about people being accountable for damages, what you're really talking about is restitution. And if there's no criminal case, there's no criminal conviction, where does the restitution come from? You can't just pull it out of thin air. Unfortunately, you made a good point a minute ago when you said we can't just lump everybody who's experiencing homelessness in the same basket. The people that we're dealing with are nothing like you lovely ladies. These are people, I mean, they're very, very difficult. Most of the time they're on drugs. 10 years ago, these are people who probably would have been in the criminal justice system, and the laws just aren't there anymore. And the criminal justice system isn't really doing much to support that. So unfortunately, there's just not much in the way of restitution. You know, I understand, and I can empathize with a lot of these business owners that are having to pay for the damages caused, but I don't know how you're supposed to come up with restitution for someone who's already on the street.
Yeah.
Can I answer that
Yeah,
real
please.
fast? So 10 years, or I guess it was back in 2000, I would say 11, I was definitely a criminal on my own regard, you know, out there on the streets, you know. I struggled with, like, I stole a few things like that. Point is, there is you can get there. It's just, again, you have to build the resources. I mean, you know, if we're just sitting here saying, well, what's going to happen? Like, I'm a business owner and someone left trash outside my yard or my door or my window. It's like, well, okay, let's get to the city and say, well, what programs do you have? Do you have a work program for these people that you pay them $5 a bag for trash that they go pick up? Do you guys have that? Because that works. And we did that organically in grassroots in Oceanside right before COVID. I went over to below the freeway, and I'm like, okay, help me clean this area, and I'll give each of you $10, you know, or a gift card, or whatever it is that you want. I mean, so again, like, the solution is creating the resources. Stop saying, well, we don't want to build it here. Well, you got to build it here, and you got to build it right. If you build it right, it's gonna work. And, you know, yeah, there are criminals. I get it. You know, in the riverbed in Oceanside, there are some places I do not go. But I still try to bring my heart. I started to bring my story. You know, I started try to encourage our community to build the resource center, to build something where people can go daily, you know, because everyone deserves an opportunity to be seen in their authentic self before all this happened, right? And so it's hard with that, business owners, because you have to create the programs in order to have them not be there. Give them purpose. Give them purpose. Start a work program.
I think
see
the
if they'll do
only
it.
thing that I would add to that is that we could add a better disability lens to what we're seeing. I mean, a lot of this is people with serious disabilities that if they had a home, if they had a home, they would have an in-home support services caregiver. But because they don't, they're left to manage their disability on their own. I don't think we can go very far. But so I just would really like to add that, I mean, yes, we definitely have a criminal element, but a lot of what we see in terms of the mess making are people with exquisite disabilities that don't have support. And I think we could add a little bit more compassion to that people.
And I think there's a misconception real fast. People don't want to be homeless. Okay, let's just please. Nobody wants to be homeless. I don't care if you are a drug addict. I don't care if you're out there running. You don't want to be homeless. It's just you get to a point, like even for me, I felt so hopeless. I felt like I couldn't get out of it, you know, and thank God I had my mom who called CPS on me. You know, she was like, we're not doing this anymore. But if she didn't do that, I don't know if I'd be in jail. I had the sheriffs and the Escondido Police Department show up at my door. I had you guys check my room. And thank God I didn't have drugs at that time with my daughter. But I was running that way, you know. And so it's just, we have to have people that are going to step up for us. People that are going to say, hey, I'm going to help you. I'm going to see how I can help you, you know. Because for me, yeah.
Equus is a part of, is headquartered in Escondido, I believe. Equus was who I partnered with the COVID-19 team in 2020. And they have case management notes that you can refer to in terms of how they ran. So there was a COVID program, and there was also a homeless transitional program where they day to day, they had a case manager, they had a mental health team, and then they had the site managers, which was what I did. they would be able to give you, and that report actually rolled up to the state. So that might be something that would give you some sense of what they did day to day. I don't know if that program still exists, if they are still doing it in Mission Valley. I just know at the time that I did that, there were like 4 or 5 hotels in Mission Valley.
Yeah.
To jump in too, I mean, we do have people who operate businesses in this room. What would have helped for you if you were outside of the business? I know some of them may have been negative experiences, but is there something that, maybe other people in the room could learn from that?
I know when I used to stand outside of the, I think it was the Bonds over here in Escondido, I had a really hard time going in, like, asking for money. Like, I had my daughter, like, going out, like, with a sign, like, I don't know, it was just where I was at, right? But I remember one lady coming out and just seeing me, She's like, "Are you okay?" And my daughter was dancing around, and they're like, "Are you hungry?" My daughter's like, "Yeah, I'm hungry," and she just showed us we cared. This was kind of at the end of my road with addiction and homelessness. It was right before I got to recovery, but just feeling seen, like someone cared about me, and even for me, like, I remember about 6 years ago, someone was going through the dumpster of our apartment complex at like 4 in the morning, and someone was screaming at them, and I walked down and I said, "Hey, no problem, just come back at 6 when it's light. Like, you're looking for recyclables, like, just don't do it, when it's like this, and then we became friends, and Nikki, who passed away recently in Oceanside, but for a good 3 years, we created this really awesome friendship by me just showing up and saying, "Hey, it's okay that you go through this, but let's do it at a time when it's not looking like you're, I don't know, just caring about people, saying hi, recognizing we're human."
Yeah. One thing I think people don't realize, and I'm not sure if we're even expressing this in our homeless plans or homeless statistics, but is how many people die. In the last 8 months or so, over a dozen people that I experienced chronic homelessness with, people with medical conditions died. And nothing in my life had prepared me for that. I mean, the grief I experienced, it's like a humanitarian disaster type level of death and grief. And so, I'd like us to include that more in the perspective as well.
And the life expectancy for somebody who lives on the streets is usually like 15 years, 20 years less than the average person. And that's for a lot of different reasons, but a lot of people have chronic health conditions, mental health, substance use, with the opioid addiction epidemic. The suicide is really high among our community, and then people who also die of basic needs, of hypothermia and different things like that. And so that's just a real thing, and I think all of us in the room have had to say goodbye to too many people that we've known on the streets that are in their 30s or 40s or 50s. That's really common. With that, I did want to kind of end the meeting tonight by asking you, what is one thing that you would like each person to take away after tonight's discussion?
Well, I would just like all of you just to open up your hearts and change the story. See that, homelessness has become a business, kind of, okay? And me being out here, I recognize that. Like, people are making a lot of money, on this homeless, and let's just take it back and just remember these are people. Like, maybe tomorrow, like, doing a small act of kindness, start changing your heart, start changing the way you speak about it, and the way you show up, it can affect all of us, at any given time, and I bet some of us in here are going rent to rent. Having to like show up and, I guarantee it, and not having enough, by the end of the month. I mean, it's real. It's a heart issue, and I just hope your hearts are impacted, and you change the story and you start talking that's out, changing that, your words are so powerful, right? So, what you speak and how you see things, don't assume when you see someone that they're just a drunk or an alcoholic or, be careful, of course, have that healthy, but don't just assume like you have no idea what led them there. And the majority of people I've worked over with the last 2 years have been families and individuals that were not addicted to drugs, that were, that really were homeless because of, other things that happen to them, domestic violence. I mean, there's so much. So be kind, you know, please.
Yeah.
I would like to see our local officials just re-examine government land and explore
intimately in the field. We're on so many forums, we meet, I mean, we have so many Zoom meetings, none of us can keep up. And 100% across the board, every single one of us says that service resistance is a myth, because we just absolutely do not have the resources, like I said, not even trauma therapy, and we don't have substance use recovery beds. I think in North County, there's like 14 beds. I mean, do you know how many beds there are for a Medi-Cal person to withdraw from drugs? And then for them to transition into a substance use recovery, there's even less beds. And so to make that smooth transition, you know, continuity of care, and then from that substance use to actually get into any kind of short-term or long-term housing, there's so many breaks in there that, I mean, my experience with people trying to get sober is that they give it everything they have over and over and over again, and the system just puts them right back where they started. So when we're looking at taking away people's rights, I think we really want to make sure that we have the resources there, and not tying those resources to taking someone's rights away. The one thing that I wish people knew about homelessness is how much of a disability rights issue it is, and how much of a failure of the Americans with Disabilities Act disability rights we have in homelessness. Or open look into ordinances that would allow homeowners to do a tiny home in their own backyard and have them be their own landlords. That there's laws that people have to abide by, you know, to be a good resident, to embrace the community that they want to be in. And I think that there's room to re-examine that at the city level.
And I think real fast, one more thing is I went up to LA and toured Hope of the Valley Rescue Mission about 3 years ago. I was really, really impressed. I went back again a couple times and met the founder and really looked at like the structure they did. And it's really succeeding because they're, you know, building what's necessary to bring in community and all the resources right there to really help people move forward. They just bring it there. And it's and I know like down in San Diego it's harder because the land's not there, but out here, you know, and there is some county land, and it's just something to really consider, you know, and to look into. And I know they're doing it in El Cajon now and at a couple different places, but especially for families and seniors and individuals and veterans to work together, it's like a really awesome thing.
People that already have fixed incomes.
To be part of a community like we all are. To have neighbors, right, that are, you know, seniors, right? I mean, this is what we want. All of us want to be part of something.
With that, I just want to thank everyone, and I want to give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
But thank you everyone for coming out tonight, and we hope that you can join us in future TAG events and community action groups. So please sign in so we can get your email, we can update you. We try to do this quarterly, as well as we do go back to City Council on a quarterly basis as well, provides updates on homelessness. So if you're interested, we'll be going back in September, so I just wanted to put that out there so you guys can stay informed and engaged. So thank you very much.
Thank you.